Hello, my name is Val, and I've been working on my own with Blender for around 5 years. I hope some of this information does well for you. I want to start this off by saying that I am by no means an expert, still learning just like you. I just want to share a lot of the stuff that I have learned. I'll be explaining this and how I process and understand parts of Blender, but I won't be going over everything. And I apologize if I'm terrible at explaining some things. First, we'll be starting off with terminology. If there's any information you already know, or just specific parts you're looking to learn, you can skip ahead to other chapters. Vertex/vertices. These are the points that make up your model. An edge is what connects two vertices, and a face is a surface made up by multiple vertices connected together. There are 3 variants of faces: triangles or tries, quadrilaterals or quads, and n-gons. If it's not already obvious by the name, tries are made up of 3 sides, quads are made up of 4 sides, and n-gons are anything more than 4 sides. Why use tries? Triangles are primarily used for optimization and guaranteeing the face is flat, but they're harder to work with if you're wanting to make modifications in the future. Why use quads? Quads allow smoother flow of all of your edges and can be easier to work with compared to tries, but not always supported for some software game engines. N-gons are sort of the lesser of the two. It's not something I've worried too much about if you're a complete beginner, but it's something I look into more if you're wanting to get deeper into 3D modeling. It's fine to use if you're not worried about the flow of your model, but it can cause issues with how light affects its surface, animation, exporting to an engine, and it's harder to modify. N-gons are generally discouraged, especially if you plan on selling your models. Not everything supports n-gons, and it may cause issues if you're wanting to 3D print the model. I personally don't use it because I prefer giving my clients the best quality I can provide, and I want the model to be as compatible as it can be. What am I talking about when I say flow or such? This is called topology. Topology is the arrangement or organization of all of your edges. If you follow an edge, does it wrap smoothly along the model, or does it suddenly veer another direction? Once you start getting further into Blender, topology may become vital to making sure your model is optimized, efficient, and easy to use. You can see how it smoothly wraps around the model, and occasionally you will have bad topology. But it's better to make a good habit out of being cautious about how your topology looks. You may be thinking, where to even start? There's just so much on the screen. Let's go over the different modes first. These affect what you want to change about the model. Object modes allows you to select different objects in your workspace. Edit mode allows you to modify, add, or remove vertices, faces, or edges. There are 3 different selection modes: vertex select mode, edge select mode, and face select mode. Like the name suggests, selecting one or multiple of these allows you to select that part. Sculpt mode is similar to edit mode, but it's not as precise. You can use different brushes and tools to sculpt and shape your model. Vertex paint, while I've never used it myself, it is said by Google to apply color to the vertices themselves rather than using an image. I'm afraid I don't have much more to explain about it since I've never actually used it. White paint, which may be talked more about later on, changes how vertices are affected by bones. From 0 to 1, you can change how much different bones affect one or multiple vertices. This is vital in character creation. Texture paint allows you to paint on your model using a flat image projected onto a model's surface. But there's a lot more to it than just that. Imagine taking a stuffed animal and cutting the seams, and laying it out flat. You can do the same thing by unwrapping the faces of your model. And then give it an image, make a new one with whatever resolution you want. And I do want to interrupt that there are more efficient and recommended texture resolutions. And as you see for this, these are the recommended texture sizes. Normally, I'll use ones in these ranges, and I'll use this for really detailed models. But generally, if it's a really small model within this range, just because it's a lot more efficient than just picking a random resolution size. And if you go into this mode, this is the mask select, by the way. And if you select a face, you can only paint on that face as long as you have this selected. We can see that now that we can actually paint on it and add whatever we like. There's also various different brushes that you may use as well. And if you go under the Edge menu, you can also mark all the different seams if it feels like it's not unwrapping very well. Or you could just unwrap individual faces if you really feel like doing that. I also forgot to add, but make sure to save your image externally rather than just letting it sit here, because you can lose your progress on that image if you say crash. And I'm sure absolutely none of you want that to happen. I'm sure some people know what it feels like to lose a bunch of progress on something you're making. I'm going to interrupt this again by saying whenever you are texture painting, you can change this setting here, which affects how far the paint goes over the border of the UVs. I won't be saving this, but say this portion here. This is really important if you're doing stuff like Roblox UGC. So I can change this. And right here. You can see it goes around 8 pixels past that border, which makes it a lot easier to safety proof your textures whenever you're exporting them. Because sometimes whenever you zoom out really far, it sort of minimizes the texture and sort of simplifies it in a way that downgrades the quality. So if you have that border, it acts as a something for it to fall back on. Hello. While I won't be going into detail on my process of making them, I can demonstrate for you with Hound here. There won't be much explaining from me, but I can show you my process directly instead of just explaining it with words. For the start of it, I normally add a grease pencil blank. Add modifier if it's like similar on both sides. Oh. And you see if it's starting to work now. And you can change the settings as however you'd like. That's normally how I do it. And then if there's features that aren't mirrored on either side, like antennae, I would normally just use annotate. Past this, I won't do much verbal explaining. I will note that even if you finish the face, it might not look complete still, but that's fine because once you start doing the textures and UV mapping, it does start to take form, and it's really just a big trust the process sort of thing because they do look weird once you start out on the face. Once you have the textures started and going, it it will get better. Normally, that's how it usually goes for me. So around this point, that I would be less strict with the topology because at this point I'm just trying to fill in the space. And if it feels like it's a good enough final look, I start sealing in all the empty spots with a little bit less than great topology, just because they're just filler spots and normally you don't have any sort of bending or morphing of that area. Don't be ashamed to have separate pieces. Not everything has to be one object. And don't mind this empty space up here because at some point it's going to be textured and filled in. It will look weird because he'll look like he has like a weird bald spot, but it's a big trust the process sort of thing. The most difficult parts you'll have is the hands and the face, unless and the body is very detailed too. But normally the hands and the face are what take the most thought. Because you have to make sure the lips will deform how you want them to. Normally I'll have 2 or 3 in between vertices for the lips. And these to control the corners, and this for the middle, and this if you want to have more flexibility with the expression. I might have not said before, but it's not terrible to have bad topology. It's just better to have a good habit of trying to make an attempt at having good topology. Because you don't want to make a bad habit of only doing bad topology. A lot of this is just going to be a rough example of what I do since it's not a actual model that I'm going to use. And then for UV unwrapping, normally I would apply the modifier, but just for simplicity's sake, I'll keep it on. Normally I'll unwrap the whole thing and then separate like the basic colors of what makes up his color palette. So around half and half, just do half and half, but if a majority of it's one color, then you can just make the other color a smaller area. And if you want straight lines, you'll go to stroke, space, and then line. And then this smooths out your line. And normally I'll take the face, deselect what I don't need, select what I do want with it. And then feel free to try the other unwrap options, because some work better than the others. And it can be a lengthy process, but it normally feels worth it in the end. And if you're only using it in Blender, you can look it up and try using Blender nodes. But that's a whole other process. Normally I'll size down the unimportant parts, or like the parts that are out of view. Most of this is a pretty lengthy process that just is something that you have to it doesn't look the best right now, but texturing is a process that takes longer if I'm genuinely trying to make something. And that's the basics of what I do when I make faces and such. That's how I started. And if you're wanting to make it neon, you can go to here. You can change it to texture. Pick your texture, assign these vertices, and turn up the strength. And what I'll normally do for most of my files is I'll go to compositing nodes. I think it's new, glare, change it to bloom. Normally I'll do 1 or 2 and turn it on always. You can always experiment with what these do, but that's what I start most of my files with. And if you're wanting to render an animation, you can go to here, choose your the resolution, your frame rate. Pick a external file folder, maybe something that's dedicated to Blender renders or maybe your animations. And then this is the temp file folder, so don't use it, but hold on, where is it? To make it a video, you go to MP4, and to keep the audio, you go to MP3. And then you'll just render animation. And to have audio, you can do this in any menu, but go to video sequencer, I think. And then you can drag in any MP3 that you have and play it. Let me see if I have one. You won't hear it because I have my desktop audio off, but it does play. And to adjust the audio, I don't remember where it is, but I believe that's it. I know last time I checked, it was in this just small little menu that you don't normally see. Yeah, I don't remember where it is, but I think you can look it up. Hello. For now, I'll be using this unfinished model to show how I make my rigs. If there's a wide enough abdominal area, you can put 2 instead of just 1. The .L signifies that it's on the left side, since it doesn't automatically know that. And you can have more detailed rigs, but normally I just make the basic things that you need. And that will still work with VR chat. Now I'll be weight painting it. If you assign these, they won't mirror. Only normally the painted weight painting mirrors. You can see it's not affected over here. That what you can do is select mirror, and then you'll have it on both sides. And this won't actually mirror it, it just selects what's in the same place on the opposite side. No, this normally only works if you have one weight. Not that. And then if I've already weight painted something, I'll hide it. I don't know what that's from. Sometimes I'll have chin bones if it works well with the model, but normally I make the open jaw as a blend shape if it's abnormally shaped. Now on separate pieces, you want to assign it to the chest since it's going to be sticking to the chest. It's supposed to be inside. You know what? I think those random vertex groups are from probably taking the hands I used for Overlord, and it brought along the information from Overlord's rig. And I guess I forgot the inside of the wrist. They're on both sides. Yeah, these are probably already rigged from being nabbed from Overlord. What it does is these are the duplicates. on dots. Because I made the rig with the direction first and not the number. The easiest thing to do is probably to change the names of these. No. Let's delete all the duplicates. Right. L.2. No, I'm confusing myself. You should be good now. I'll just do one figure for simplicity's sake. In our time. Not that one. I change this to hand. I always get that part mixed up. These are the only parts that I'd probably change. So that's not flipping outside. Not as much, but there's only so much you can do with the way hands get structured, drawing wise. How'd that happen? I was changed the name around. Sometimes on these parts, I'll introduce a little bit of drag by using the head weight paint to sort of flatten it out without using scaling. You can see instead of being all pointy, it smooths it out. But that's about it. It is a very lengthy process, but you sort of get used to it. Now we'll be taking a look at rigs. We'll be looking at my Sunder rig, since he utilizes more bones than my other rigs do. So a rig is basically a digital skeleton for your model. And the main thing is positioning the ends of the bones at where you want that joint to pivot at. And you can change how they look in this menu. Normally I go with stick because it's easier to see while still leaving, making it obvious to see without taking up much space. But normally how I accurately pose them is by either taking the middle vertex and putting cursor to selected, or it'll take the whole thing and do cursor to selected. But it just depends on if both sides are symmetrical. If they're not symmetrical, then it'll offset where the pivot of the joint is. So then I'll select this ball and selection to cursor. And normally you'll stay in this mode just so you can make sure you keep an eye on the direction of the bones, because that does matter. But mainly you want to assemble it similar to how a human skeleton would work, just depending on what kind of avatar you have probably, but you mainly want to keep it close to a human skeleton. I forgot to go over this in rigging, but if you're wanting to say like the shoulder bone, if you're wanting it to move with the torso, you'll parent it. And if you're wanting it not to be connected, you'll choose keep offset. Now these bones may work like pistons. And this is done by going, I believe, it's pose mode, into pose mode, and adding a damp track. So what the damp track does is that it tells the bone to keep looking at this bone. And since pistons are always facing each other, this is normally how you would make them or rig them. Normally I wouldn't have these many lip bones, but if you're wanting a really expressive character, I would add more. You don't have to have eyeball bones or like eyelid bones. You can always make blend shapes or blinks, but I add the bones just in case I want to use them to make and pose other expressions other than blink. And you reset it by clear transform all. It does get tedious, but it's vital for making avatars and such. And this is normally used, but I just add it anyways. They do have a limit on how far they can extend, depending on how far you extended the piston. But normally I put it at a length that it won't be seen unless you're really trying to bend it past its limits, which normally I don't. I will also be showing how I did these. I do believe I followed a tutorial for them, but I don't remember what one it is. You can see rather than individually posing the bones, it'll sort of estimate it for you. And I did that by adding a bone constraint. Let me see which one it was. That one. But basically, I believe you change this to tell it how far back it goes, how many bones it affects. And sometimes it does take a lot of work to really get it working a efficient way. But basically, you'll have your control bone just so it's easy to pose and you can point it whichever direction you like. And all there will be imperfections with how it works. I feel like it's good enough for what it might be used for. Let me see which one this is. Okay, so that's this bone. And I believe that's telling it how. No, that's the last bone that it should affect. And this one lets you to move it. This one just lets you angle it. Other than that, that's about it. After this, I'll be going about weight painting. I don't have any other models to actually demonstrate this with, but hopefully this is satisfactory. Now we'll be going over weight painting. Basically, you tell the bones what parts or what vertices you want the bones to affect. Because while you can, let me start from the beginning. When you're wanting to parent the mesh to the rig, you'll select the rig first, select the mesh, then parent, and choose one of these. Empty groups means that there won't be any weight paints done for you. Automatic weights means that it automatically weight paints it for you, but it's less accurate, especially with robotic forms, because it's more so used for organic bodies, not something that strictly ends here. But after that, you'd parent it for one of these, and you'll get these. As long as you have the bones named right, you should be able to tell what ones these are. So basically, you're just selecting what vertices you want this bone to affect. This bone is the index, this middle one. And you can use all sorts of tools for it. And you can hide vertices, you can select vertices and only work within the ones you have selected. And if you click this drop down menu, you'll have a search bar. But it can be very tedious, but it's also one of the vital parts to making a character. Because this is what allows your character to move with the bones. I'll also be talking about shape keys. These are basically presets that save where you move where you move vertices. And you can use them when rigging just doesn't work for the kind of expressiveness that you're wanting. And it's also very vital when making your character into a VTuber like this. Let's say I want him to wink. I can adjust how much it affects the original set base. And that's this. And I also forgot to mention, but if you're having troubles with weight painting, you'll go into here and you'll select mirror vertex groups. And then select on what axis. Because sometimes it doesn't automatically have that on. Sometimes you have to do it yourself. Shaders basically tell the model how it should be affected by light or how it should be presented. And it does get very complex. And there's a lot to Blender nodes, and they can only be used within Blender. They don't work externally. This is something that can only exclusively be used within Blender because it's a engine specific thing. But this is the shader I used for Optimus, which gives this sort of robots in disguise kind of look, at least in my opinion. But it's definitely something worth getting into because they can be very helpful, especially if you're looking for a stylized look like this. And if I were to move the light source, you can see that it also affects the color of the mesh. And that's because of these different materials with different shaders applied to them. And they're all just color ramps, really simple. It's just saying that the closer light, the brighter the affected area should be, and the farther away, the darker. And I also got the outline by using a solidify uh, modifier with these settings. And the reason it has all of these different colors on the outline is basically that it's applying the outline to each of these, but it's also getting offset by the different positions of the materials. So if I were to move this, you can see that it affects the color of the outline over specific areas. Which I believe is because I have it offset too. If this is the white area, that means it has the orange outline. If I were to move it, now it has this deep gray outline, sort of gray. And that's just because of how the light is affecting it. But yeah, they're very useful, even if they can't be used everywhere. It's something that I especially use because big detailed models like Optimus would be painful to texture. So it's just a lot easier to use a shader instead of individually texturing each thing. And you can look stuff up about it. I would also like to add that there are different shaders for EB and cycles. Cycles, most of the time, EB shaders won't work on there. I would say cycles is used for more detailed, realistic type stuff.